everyone, welcome back to my kitchen. Today we are making a yellow layer cake that is going to knock your socks off. It's super delicious, the cake layers are moist and fluffy, and it's going to be frosted with a chocolate buttercream. This recipe does require a stand mixer or a hand mixer, and we're going to be using a whisk attachment to help incorporate some air by creaming together the butter and the sugar. So we're going to start off by doing that and then mix together all of our other ingredients to make our yellow cake layers. So we're starting off by adding our butter into our stand mixer. This is unsalted butter at room temperature, and we're going to cream that together with granulated sugar. We're going to mix this on high for a couple minutes until the mixture becomes lighter in color. So now that we've creamed together our butter and our sugar, I'm adding in our eggs two at a time. I'm also stirring in between each addition just to make sure that everything is getting incorporated really well. And now it's time to alternate adding in our dry ingredients and our wet ingredients. And I'm just going to whisk this together quickly to make sure it's incorporated evenly. So I'm adding in 1/3 of my flour mixture here. And once that's incorporated, I'm going to alternate that with half of my buttermilk. You definitely don't want to overmix your batter because that can lead to dense, tough cake layers. You want these to be nice, moist, and fluffy, so you definitely want to mix until the ingredients are just incorporated. So there's still a tiny bit of flour that's visible, but that's fine at this stage. Next, I'm adding in half of my buttermilk. We'll stir that together, and then we'll repeat this process with our remaining ingredients. Our last two ingredients here are some vegetable oil, and then of course a little bit of vanilla extract. Our batter is all ready to go. I have taken some parchment paper cutouts just like this. I get them on Amazon. Place them inside of my 7-inch pans, and I'm going to spray them with some nonstick cooking spray. If you don't have 7-inch pans, you can always use 3 8-inch pans with this amount of batter. I prefer using 7-inch because it makes taller cakes and I really enjoy the way that looks. But if you don't have this size of pan, it's totally fine. So I like to do my best to eyeball dividing my batter between my pans. Then I use a kitchen scale to make sure that it's perfect. So it can vary a bit between the pans, but as long as it's within about 10 grams of each other, you're perfect. So just to make sure that the batter is evenly distributed throughout the pan and that any air bubbles that might be trapped rise to the surface before these are baked, I take a kitchen towel and I just carefully bang my pans against my counter. So now I'm going to pop these into my preheated 350-degree oven. My oven is really small and bakes a bit unevenly, so halfway through the baking process I'm going to rotate my cake pans to help them bake more evenly. So our cake layers are out of the oven, and now it's time to just level the tops of them. So you can see they baked pretty flat, but just to make the assembly process of the cake a little bit easier, I like to use a serrated knife and just trim the top of the cake layer so that when we stack them, they're super straight and easy to get a smooth coat of frosting on. So now it's time for the most fun part. We're gonna assemble our cake. I wanna give my buttercream one good stir before I do that. It's been sitting here for a little bit and sometimes it can develop air bubbles as it sits. So just by working it around with a rubber spatula like this, you help push all that air out of the frosting to make it super smooth for your cake. So to start, I'm going to add a dab of buttercream to my cake board. This is a 10-inch grease-proof cake board. And I'm just fanning out this buttercream to act kind of as glue to my first cake layer. It's going to stick it in place and help it not slide around while we assemble. So now that that's in place, it's time to add an even layer of buttercream. I like to add a pretty generous layer here because I love frosting and I especially love chocolate frosting, but you can add as much or as little as you like based on your preference. So I'm working the frosting from the center to the edge in some slow, kind of smooth motions. As you do this, you just want to try to keep a very fluid motion and not do a lot of pulling up, because that can cause a lot of crumbing. So by having kind of a continuous smooth motion, you reduce the chance of crumbing and you get a perfectly smooth layer of buttercream. So we're going to repeat that process with our remaining cake layers. So at this point in time, I like to bend down and just make sure that everything is nice and straight and aligned. And now we're going to cover the cake in a thin crumb coat. So a crumb coat does exactly what it sounds like. It just traps in any of these rogue crumbs that you can see are falling onto our cake board. So we're going to use the overhanging frosting here to start to create our crumb coat. I'm also going to take some additional frosting from my bowl because we want to make sure that the cake layers are fully coated. So we're working the frosting all the way down to the bottom here, and I'm going to do a quick spin with my large offset to smooth it out. So now it's time for our bench scraper. We're just going to smooth this out and remove any excess frosting. Not a ton, but a little bit. For the top rim of the cake, I really like to use a small offset spatula. It gives me a little bit more control, and I just feel more comfortable scraping away the excess buttercream with it. So I am removing bits of buttercream and I'm just scraping it onto my bench scraper. You could also scrape it into a bowl, but just make sure that you're scraping it each time. If you don't, you're going to drag all that extra buttercream into the center of the cake and you're going to end up with kind of a dome. So if you want a nice flat top, just be sure that you're removing that excess buttercream as you go. If you don't have room in your freezer, you can always put it in your fridge too, but it'll take about 30 minutes to really get cold. So our cake has been in the freezer for about 10 minutes. Our crumb coat is firm to the touch. You can see the frosting is nice and cold. Now it's time to add our second thicker layer of frosting. To decorate this cake, I wanted to keep it really simple and playful because I think a lot of people, when they think about eating yellow cake, they think about their childhood and birthday cakes they may have had. And I just didn't want to fuss with a bench scraper on this. So we're actually just going to add a thick layer of frosting with our offset spatula. And then I'm going to create some fun kind of swooshes in the frosting with a spoon. So similarly to before, I'm just working it over the edge of the cake here. Give it a little spin to get it evenly distributed. And then we'll cover the sides of the cake. So I'll work it around just to make sure that everything is pretty evenly covered. It's time for the swooshes. You can use any spoon you want. I'm going to go around and I'm just going to make some little, for lack of a better word, swooshes. So I'm going to do these in different directions to give the cake a lot of texture. Also, if you're scraping off a lot of extra buttercream, you can always scrape the excess into the bowl if it's getting in the way. So I'm definitely using the top half of the spoon here. I'm kind of having fun doing alternating swooshes. So I'm doing one this way, then one this way. I don't know where I'm going with this. Just keep going until you feel like you've got enough texture. I'm actually pretty happy with that. So now it's time to do the top. And I'm going to do the same strokes as I did before. Ooh, ooh, ooh. I'm feeling this. I really love the way this cake looks, but I just feel like plain chocolate buttercream, even though I love it and it tastes great, isn't enough for a final decoration. So I've actually melted some dark chocolate and I'm gonna add some swooshes of that on top of our buttercream. I'm just gonna put it on the back of my spoon and kind of add it into some of those swirl marks. I'm just trying to kind of blend the dark chocolate with my fun little swooshes. Now I'm just going around any areas that I think need a little bit more chocolate. I'm being really aggressive with these swoops. Maybe this is like a form of anger management, like, yeah, you take that. It does feel kind of good. I think that the extra looks so much better. I'm so happy with this. It just looks so much more chocolatey. So our cake is all ready to go. Normally I try to match my knife to my cake, but since this is a yellow cake, I don't have a yellow knife that's big enough, and I definitely don't have a brown knife, so I'm just gonna cut this cake with a pink knife. So it's so beautiful. It doesn't really have a bad side, but I think I'll cut in right here. Oh my god, that's one epic cake slice. That is gorgeous. And enough to feed like 10 people. We have beautiful thick yellow cake layers with a generous amount of buttercream between each bit. And that's it. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to click the like and subscribe button. If you want to recreate this recipe, you can find it on Chelsweets.com. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you guys again soon.